Yeah, great. Okay, awesome. We'll start. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Why People Buy. Today, I have someone very special with me as a guest. I have Sachi Malhotra, the founder of That Sassy Thing. Sachi, welcome. So excited to have you on board.
Thank you so much, Aditi. It's a pleasure to be here. The pleasure is entirely mine, pun intended.
I'm so lucky to have you on the show because I've been a big fan of yours ever since we met about I think a year back, where we were both at an event as speakers. I remember hearing your story, and I was just in love with the passion with which you've been building this brand, Sachi. Truly, truly a fan of yours. So thank you so much for being part of this episode and this show.
Thank you for being so kind and for the sweet words. It means a lot. Yeah.
And Sachi, of course, talking a little bit about Sachi, she's built one of India's largest sexual wellness, intimate wellness brands, right, focused on women. And I think beyond being someone who's built that category, she's also someone who's furthered the cause, I think, of women's sexual wellness. So that I am that in itself is a mammoth task, Sachi, and I'm sure everywhere around the country we are all cheering for you, rooting for you. Thank you so much for taking this up and for, of course, building such a wonderful brand that the country loves.
Thank you so much. Definitely, it is quite a mammoth task, as you rightly put, because any kind of change is long term, right? It takes a lot of time. And I think sometimes it can be, I mean, you get impatient as well, right? Because it's not like you're changing behaviors at the end of the day, you're changing mindsets, right? So that does take time. Um, but I think the goal always was to build a brand that stands for something, comes from a deeply personal journey and a personal place as well. I'm glad that has resonated and you feel that way. So that really means a lot.
Thank you, Sachi. And I remember, hearing your story about how one of your biggest cheerleaders as you went in the startup journey was your father, right? I would love to hear a little bit more about how did you come across this idea and how did you go about getting the product market fit for a category where, awareness is super low. People probably don't even know what they want, right? So how did you go about it? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I'll talk a little bit about the backstory. So please bear with me,
We'd
because
love
it's
to
all
hear that.
linked. Yeah. So, the brand, as I said, comes from a deeply personal place. I would go right back to my childhood when I was 15 years old. I was diagnosed with a condition called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Very common. 3 in 5 women in India have it. And it's a hormonal condition due to which I experienced a lot of changes in my body, as do other women, but symptoms vary from women to women. So for me, it was experiencing excessive weight gain, excessive body hair, vaginal dryness, finding sex painful as I grew older, things like that. And because of the excessive body hair and weight gain, I was bullied in school and I would say at home as well. So that, made me realize that there's no safe space where women can have these conversations openly in a non judgmental way. So that little girl in me always wanted to have that space where you could talk about things related to your body without feeling shame, without the judgment in that way. Then I also luckily had a lot of professional experiences related to the space as well. So from 2012 to 2015, my co-founder, who's also my husband, he was running a creative agency, back then, and we both got to work on one of the largest condom brands in the country. So that's when we actually realized that the whole category was very focused on men and the male gaze. And women were completely left out of the conversation when it came to products, when it came to culture overall. So again, 50% of the population was being left out. We didn't know what to do with it back then, but that ick was there, that that thought was there that this has to change somehow. Then this is too much information but relevant to what we are building. Whenever my partner, like my co-founder, him and I were dating 2015 onwards, whenever we would hook up, for a lack of a better term, and we would end up needing a lubricant was very central to our experiences. And because I had PCOS, that vaginal dryness was there, so we would always end up going to the market and using those really bad flavored lubes. And because of that, I experienced UTIs, yeast infections as well. And for him, the experience was bad too. Like he would end up smelling like chocolates and strawberries and then have to go back to work, smelling like that. So I would say that was like the pain point that we had, where we thought that there had to be a better alternative, a lube that's not icky and dirty and flavored in a way, and not designed, I mean, these were not designed keeping women in mind. So that was another ticking point, I would say. And fast forward to 2016, I was doing my masters. I was in the US 2016 to 2018. My partner and I, we were in a long distance relationship at that point. And again, like, I would end up getting a lot of the loops from the US, and I, was there at the cusp of the sex positive revolution happening. So a lot of new age D2C brands popping up. I would say, reaching out to audiences beyond men, being more inclusive, making products for women as well. So that really gave me an insight into the category globally, per se. And like 2018, when I came back, I was working on building other D2C brands in different categories across skincare, across, personal care, men's innerwear, things like that. I got to work on some really interesting brands also, leading brands of India. That way I dabbled into D2C, I dabbled into, like the consumer space, got excited about it. And I think the eureka moment, like so to say, was in 2020 when the COVID restrictions were slightly lifted, 2021 actually, and sorry, 2020, my bad. And my husband and I, we had like called over a few friends for, like a meal. So it was people in different stages of their relationship. One of our friends had just gotten married, one had just had a child, and there was one friend who got a Tinder date along. Few drinks down, the conversation automatically went to sex, and it was actually funny and sad at the same time, where all the men in the room were like, we are amazing at it, and when it came to the women, they were all just like, we're not enjoying it and it's not fun for us. So that's when we realized that, okay, hey, there is this gap that exists, and we delved further into that and realized that the orgasm gap is something that's real, where when it comes to men and women in a heterosexual relationship, like basically like close to 90% of women don't experience an orgasm, which is only 9% of men not experiencing it. So that is what really kept us up at night, and we were like, okay, this is something we have to solve for. And I think that is where the whole idea of the brand coming along kind of really started taking up shape. And interestingly, because you also mentioned the bit about like my dad being really supportive, I'll also talk about where that came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think like I was really lucky. For starters, I would say my co-founder and my husband like being extremely supportive and really talking to my parents that, this is something that we want to do, having that conversation as well, and like really easing into that conversation and normalizing it for my parents too. So his support was always there. And I think like my mom was someone who was like, my God, Sachi, log kya kahenge? You know, यही products क्यों launch करने हैं? Why not any other products? So she had that. I mean, she had that, conditioning, I would say, socially. But when it came to my dad, he always saw the business as a business, and he always saw the opportunity aspect of it. So much so that initially, like, because so he is basically in the hospitality industry and has been in the hospitality industry for like 35 plus years. And a lot of his work involved, imports, exports, and traveling across the world, including China and Hong Kong as well. So a lot of the trade fairs would happen in Hong Kong, some in China as well. And he would end up actually like going there and getting a lot of samples for us also. So that's what I meant by him seeing this as a business and really, like helping us out initially to do that research as well. So he played a pivotal role there. And I think even when it come to like, even when it came to cheering us on, he was always like front and center and totally, unafraid and not feeling awkward about it. Like I remember him, a couple of moments where, let's say, like if there is an article that came out in XYZ publication, he would be the first one to, put a WhatsApp blast on 10,000 WhatsApp groups, share it with his 20,000 LinkedIn followers, and do that in a very like normal way, like, that. And I think that was really something, because I feel like I'm very lucky and privileged that I had that support in that sense.
He's a proud father indeed. I mean,
Yes,
how far you have come, right?
absolutely. No, no, 100%. So I really got lucky in that department.
Very, very inspiring story, Sachi. And like you said, you know, your father being a support, and of course your husband being your partner
Yes.
in starting this, that definitely plays a big role, right, in the early stages of any business, but especially so here because of all the societal baggages that we carry when we look at this category, right?
Absolutely. And Aditya, I joke about this. So a lot of times I introduced Himanshu, my co-founder, as my partner in business and in bed. And people love it, I think. I don't know about him. I think he's come around it. Earlier he would get a little embarrassed, but yeah, I just like go all
That's
out
the
and
most
do it.
succinct way
Yeah,
to to
absolutely.
explain it. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but I'm very curious to understand for your TG, right, the buying group. There are so many of these societal layers that are there for someone to even understand or have that buying trigger that we want to buy this product, right? So how do you navigate through that? So if I ask you the question why people buy sexual wellness products. Of course, we know the obvious reason, which is you said the gap, but help me understand how you went about creating the awareness, how you went about sort of creating the category so that people could actually be comfortable to buy.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yes, I mean, there are obvious reasons in terms of why people buy, but people also buy because of curiosity or, the fact that they want to explore themselves and explore their bodies, which I feel like is not a very, like, I think not a concept that we were taught growing up because we were not imparted any sex education growing up. And a lot of our communication and how we wanted to build the brand kind of stemmed from that aspect that we got little to no sex ed growing up, right? I don't know what was it like for you. I'm curious to know.
Same everywhere.
Yeah,
Same everywhere. I was in a convent school. We had one session in our tent where
yeah,
everybody was just made to come together and pun unintended and
yeah.
given a sex ed class. That was all.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like so it was the same for me, going to school in Delhi, you had girls in one room, boys in another room. So that gender divide was created already. And girls are taught random stuff about periods by pouring blue liquid onto pads and just extremely clueless,
That actually happened for you? I thought I was only in ads.
No, no, no. It actually happened. Like there was a brand who had conducted this and it was all blue liquid and, you know, girls like wondering and being freaked out that, okay, what is happening? And all the boys were just giggling. So yeah, so I think it was pretty limited to that. And I think like one more thing we joke around is that the only sex ed I got was like a day prior to getting married. My husband was in the corner and my mom was in the other corner, took me, next to her and very shyly told me that beta, keep your husband happy. And I just reacted in the most bizarre way. And I told her he's already happy and she flipped completely. So yeah, so I think from that, I would say that the brand is a sum of our own lived experiences as well, right? Because sexual wellness is something so personal to everyone, and it's also so subjective as well that it has to stem from like the experiences that real people have. Like it's at the end of the day, a natural, a human act, right? So a lot of it also came from this idea that hey, there is no sex education, and that helped us build a lot of awareness, being an education led brand. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We were the first brand in the country to launch very holistic and credible masterclasses on sex ed. These were about 50 to 60-minute long videos where we collaborated with the best sexuality educators in India to impart education on different topics. So we had every masterclass had like 7 to 8 modules on different topics like gender and sexuality, on the basics of sex ed, talking about all things right from how to use a condom, how to avoid STIs, different kinds of birth control options available, things that we didn't really know growing up at all, and we were just expected to just figure it all out. Then we also had one masterclass on intimacy after childbirth because we realized that a lot of our customers were young mothers, but mothers are not seen as sexual beings even though they gave birth to kids, which is pretty ironic. And then we did one more masterclass with the only trauma informed sex therapist in India on healing from sexual trauma, because how you feel outside the bedroom deeply impacts how you feel in the bedroom as well. So it was a lot of that, and I think like early on and even now, awareness also comes from me sharing my personal journey, my personal experiences. what struggles I faced as well, because I realized that once we talk about that and, like really normalize that and put ourselves out there are so many people who have similar struggles, similar experiences, right? And that's something that they relate to and can really see themselves, like they feel seen in a way. So I think that's been really important. Apart from just talking about products, there is like a whole array of things to kind of talk about, when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to bodies, when it comes to sex, relationships, intimacy. So yeah, I think like having a very content and education first approach helps.
Yeah, no, as a marketer, I think what I really take away from this is when you're creating a new category, first you have to create awareness about
Yeah.
the existence of the category, right? So the master classes that you're talking about, first people need to know that that this is something that, exists or there's a need for this, right? So very, very interesting. But I'm guessing in general, marketing for you would have had its challenges given that this category would have restrictions, right? Whether it is on Meta or on other platforms. So tell us, how did you go about marketing and advertising for the category?
Yeah, 100% there are a lot of restrictions, when it comes to advertising, marketing on Meta. And it's not just from a product standpoint, even content. So a lot of times the content gets censored as well. And so I remember, initially we would do a lot of, now even we do a lot of illustrations of real women. So women with, body hair, women with wrinkles, women with stretch marks. And a lot of those illustrations would get censored, they would get flagged and taken down. I mean, we always believed in showing real bodies, and like celebrating real women and real bodies in that sense. But the thing is that a lot of the, policies or the policy violations would be blanket bans. So they would have like a blanket, adult or nudity policy that they would apply to things that are not even any way explicit in nature. So I'm talking about, like women illustrations, clothed women, that would get rejected. When it came to products, it is challenging, definitely, when it comes to advertising the product. So you can't really show the product, you can't show the packaging, even the shape of the product would also get flagged. And you can't talk about how it makes you feel. So definitely it's not as straightforward as, marketing for skincare, hair care, or fashion at all. And we've had those challenges and we've had that journey, which I feel like is kind of ongoing, and we figured out ways and like means to kind of I would say market around those restrictions.
Is that you take inspiration from where such surrogate marketing is required, where you can't actively advertise, or did you feel that your journey was very unique? There's no other industry from where it fits the same bill.
Yes, I would say there was no playbook at all, and we've had to figure it out on our own. Because it's not the same as, I mean, conceptually, yes, it's similar to maybe alcohol as a category, right? Where surrogacy is something that people depend on having, launched a soda, for example, and, advertising that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, or a water brand, yeah. So I think that's a little different for us. The thing is that the core product and allied products also. So, for example, I can't easily advertise a lubricant as well, right? And so, like, what we figured was having innuendos, creating our own language of sorts in a way when it comes to communication. So, for example, very specifically, you cannot advertise a vibrator as a vibrator or a sex toy. You can't call it that. So we coined this term called toy friends, and we would call it toy friends, talk about it like that. So I think the restrictions push you to be more creative. And I think that is something that was or has been a plus and, like a positive for us in a way, because both me and my co-founder come from communication, marketing, brand backgrounds in that sense. So I think that was something that came naturally to us in a way. But definitely, like, there are platform led restrictions that, definitely limit us in terms of reaching the right audiences. Because it's funny, like these platforms actually, enable us to reach the audiences as well, but at the same time they restrict us from reaching our audiences. I mean, they're supposed to enable us, but at the same.
Discoverability also would have been a challenge, right? Like what kind of
Yeah.
search keywords do you show up
Yes.
for, etc.
Yeah, yeah. And hence, like, the vibrators are advertised as massagers. And that's become like a common, I would say, term across the category now. And people have started understanding it as well, because it's also been about 5 years since we launched. So, there is like a whole ecosystem kind of created around it now.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you've also, Sachi, always focused on building your own brand as well, right? As a founder. I remember when we spoke last time, you also mentioned how that's sort of part and parcel of your everyday life now. You think content first a lot of ways, and that has also helped your brand grow, right? So for a D2C founder or for any founder, right? How important do you think, how important a role does founder brand play? Of course, we know, the Dipinder Goyals of the world have, of course, created their own very strong brand, Nikhil Kamats of the world. But do
Yeah.
you think that founder branding today is imperative to grow the brand? Do you think it's not necessarily imperative, but it's a great, benefit to have? What is your point of view on that?
Do think, like how new age brands are built in the D2C sphere now is very different from what was the case, let's say, like 3 to 4 years back. So I do think having a founder brand is really important because people trust people and not brands. I think simply put. So I feel like it's so important to put yourself out there, put your journey out there because people want to know the why behind what you're doing. They want to know the intent behind it as well, right? Like, of course, like, I'm not saying that it doesn't work, if a brand is only like probably like sales led and not a lot of the founder coming in and, talking about the journey, talking about the behind the scenes, the highs and lows, etc. I'm sure it works for like a lot of brands as well, but I think it depends on also the category you're in and the kind of audiences that you're targeting to. Specifically for us, we are in a category where we also do have other challenges, right? Like in terms of product not being able to be advertised 100%, finding ways and means around that. So I think in that case, also it becomes all the more important. Secondly, the topic is such that you need to kind of normalize and ease people into it as well, right? So I think it is really important to kind of be the face of it. And for us, the focus has always been to build for women, and be a women focused brand. So all the more it becomes important for me to put myself out there and yeah, but I do think like in today's day and age, people want to know your story, they want to know the journey, they want to know, like why you're doing what you're doing and
The
how are you
authenticity is very important today.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's so important to be authentic because I feel like when someone is being performative, also, I think people can really make that out now. So, yeah, so I think it is important to kind of bear yourself and be honest and put yourself out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight, because even as a marketer, I'm always thinking, right, the more content that is out there, the more
Yeah.
important it is for you to like cut out the perform
Yes.
bullshit and focus on
Yes.
being your authentic self, whether it is as a brand, and
Yeah.
then people behind the brand becomes very important, right? Who are you
Yeah.
trusting, right?
And I think in a category that's always been low trust, also, right? Like, as a category like sexual wellness has been a low trust category. So, it is all the more important to kind of build that credibility and bring in that trust
Yeah.
also. So, that's another way to kind of look at it.
Absolutely, absolutely. For D2C overall as a category, of course, I mean, we are at a wonderful, I think, space today. Can't imagine a decade back that we would have D2C brands who are doing phenomenally well. Some of them, have IPO'd on the way, right? If someone's starting today, right, as a D2C founder, what would be your advice to them?
I think because we were talking about like building, content first businesses and, founder first brands also in a way, I would say record your journey from day one. It's something that I didn't do, I think, back then. So that's where this is coming from. Record your journey from day one, not just the milestones and, the big wins, but also the setbacks. Because I feel like there is so much value in that and there's so much, like I feel like knowledge sharing that can happen there. And that's what I feel like an authentic brand really is, right? Like it's how authentic the people building it are. So I think that's one advice that I would give, that record everything from day one. And I think like really put yourself out there. I feel like when we are just starting out, there is so much of, like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm doing this right." You don't have to be doing anything right, first of all. I think you everything is an experience, right? Like all the failures are experiences as well, and they compound to, like I would say having bigger learnings in that sense. So I feel like something that I personally started doing when I started putting myself out there also was that really not focus on or like kind of try to push away the imposter syndrome that kind of creeps in. And I think that happens more so with women as well. So not thinking about what if I'm not saying this, the right way, what am I going to sound like, look like, all of those things. um am I going to sound like the smartest person on planet Earth? Maybe not, and that's okay. Like, I mean, I think not judge yourself and just put yourself out there. And I think sometimes when you don't have that confidence, fake it till you make it. I mean, unpopular opinion, but I think you have to fake it till you make it.
That's wonderful advice, Sachi, because if I think about it, I think what I've always heard from D2C brands who I've spoken to in my day job, right?
Yeah,
The biggest challenge they always talk about is, we are always stuck in this ROAS loop. The
yeah,
way to break free is to build your brand, but that seems to be also there's no path which is like a very laid out path, right, to build your
yeah,
brand. But the
yeah,
advice you're giving is that, hey, you know what, being your authentic self, putting yourself as the founder and as a
yeah.
creator out there is itself a very important
Path.
step.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think it's okay if there is no path. I think you figure out the paths as you go, as you put yourself out there, because no one knows it like from day one at all. Everyone's either faking it or pretending that they know it all, honestly.
Yeah. Some
So
of them
just,
make it even without realizing how they made it, and then they backtrack and see.
yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And the right moment will never come. I think it's just now. Just like, don't overthink it, I would say, I think that's really important.
Awesome, Sachi. Thank you so much. Such a wonderful conversation, and I learned so much from a marketing lens, from a psychology lens, from all of the things that I wanted to learn about. I had a
Thank
wonderful time
you.
talking to you. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
part
so
of the show.
much.
Had a
Thank you
wonderful.
so much for having me.
Thank
Take
you.